1, 2, 3, 4.
Everybody, this is Jewish Talk on the Voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, streaming live on the college station, on the TuneIn app, and on the iHeartRadio app. And all week long, you can find this program once again reposted on Spreaker.com. Good morning to everybody, to the Kilshevskis, to Harvey Kipnis, and to everybody joining us, not only on the radio, but on Facebook Live. I'm Rabbi Pearl, and today our discussion takes us back to 91 years ago, to 1927. On tonight, which on the Jewish calendar marks the 12th day of the month of Tammuz, this is the date, that's tomorrow and on Tuesday, where we celebrate an amazing event in the life of the 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Joseph Isaac Schneerson. The 6th Lubavitcher Rebbe was, of course, the father-in-law to our Rebbe. He was officially granted release from his sentence of exile to Kastarama in the interior of Russia. A quick background. 27 days earlier, the Rebbe had been arrested by the agents of the GPU, which was at that time the Russian secret police. He was arrested for his activities to preserve Judaism throughout the Soviet Empire, and he was sentenced to death, God forbid. Due to international pressure, it forced the Soviets to commute the sentence to exile, and subsequently, he was released completely. So the actual release took place on the Tammuz 13, which would be this year on Tuesday, but it was Monday and Tuesday, or the 12th and the 13th day of Tammuz, is a day that is celebrated as a festival of liberation by the Chabad Lubavitch community. And today we're going to discuss the significance, some of the details, but I'd first like to share with you some special music, a very favorite music of the previous Rebbe. It's called the Benini Nigun, and it speaks of the inner struggles that all of us have, and this was a favorite tune to the previous Rebbe. Please listen. Thank you very, very much, and perhaps later we'll come back to that. But I'd like to say again, welcome to everybody listening to us at WHPC, and to all those, and to Jonathan Wolf, who's spending this weekend with in a community where they have Chabad. And welcome to Howard Eisenstadt. And Jonathan Wolf says a very inspiring nigun, and it reflects the inner struggle, the inner aspirations of all of us. And therefore, in honor of this great day of liberation in the life of the previous Rebbe, just to put it into perspective, obviously not only was this a celebration of his own personal release from prison at that time by the Soviet Union, but also precipitated the ultimate release of all Soviet Jewry that took over 60 years. But this was the beginning. So it was not only a personal liberation, but also the ultimate liberation of all those who wished to leave Soviet Union and to practice their religion in freedom, whether they came to the United States, to Israel, and around the world. So today, in that honor, I'd like to share with you, just to give you a little bit of feeling of this previous Rebbe, and I share with you from his own diary. You see, at the age of 11, starting that age, Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak of Lubavitch, let's call him the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, began to keep a journal in which he wrote faithfully for his entire lifetime. Often, for several hours a day, he would sit and keep this diary. And he recorded his personal experiences as well as the wealth of Hasidic wisdom and lore which he had observed and absorbed while growing up in Lubavitch, in the home of his father, the Rebbe. His Rebbe, his father was the Rebbe, the Rebbe Rashab. And he would record all the events surrounded by the great personalities of his time. And therefore today I'd like to share with you one excerpt when he was 12 years old, and it recounts an event which took place 1 year earlier, to appreciate the previous Rebbe speaking about what happened to him a year earlier when he was only 11 years old. And that was to be the first of many incarcerations for preserving and standing up for the rights of others. So here goes. So, quoting from his own diary, following the guidance and instruction of my father, I used my entire fortune, which at that time amounted to some 30 rubles, and he received this in reward for reviewing his learning by heart. And he used his money, his pocket money, you could say, to establish a free loan fund. Right? We're talking about an 11-year-old who took his money and he established a free loan fund. He would provide interest-free loans in small sums of 3 to 5 rubles to market people and to peddlers who made their rounds in the villages with bundles of flax, pelts, chickens, eggs, onions, and the like. We're talking about in the 1890s. So that's what the typical thing was. So again, back to the diary. On the advice of my teacher of Nissen, I kept accounts. The days before and after the market day are my busy business days, in which I distribute and collect the loans. Among the regulars who frequently made use of my fund was Reb David the butcher. He was nicknamed the one with the teeth, because he had große Zähne. Rabbi David is a man of 50. He heads a family of 8 children. He was a frightful pauper who earned a living from the toil of his hands. No work in the world was too difficult for him, be it in the scorching heat of the summer, in a winter snowstorm, or in the rainy season, as long as he could earn a few kopkas for his work. Never does he complain about his miserable state and his misery. So this Reb David was a simple man. He had studied in the Cheder when he was a child, but he'd forgotten most of his learning. Aside from the prayers for the high holidays and the festivals, he would say psalms and he would do the Pesach, and he didn't know too much, but he had a minute. But he was a wholesome, honest man, and every day, save those that he worked in the next village, he was among the first men to wake up and say the psalms and pray with a minyan in the synagogue. And the previous Rebbe now continues. This is from his diary when he was 12 years old. He writes, I love to catch those moments on an afternoon preceding the Sabbath or the holidays when you would see Reb David, the butcher, Coming home from his bathhouse, preparing for the Sabbath, his face was aflame, and the edge of his white shirt was peeking out, with his children surrounding him and running with him, and knew that in an hour later he would be in the synagogue praying. So that weekend, or that day, his parents were away for a time, and he was staying with his grandmother. This is the previous Rebbe writing. He stayed with his grandmother, Rebbetzin Rivka. And his Cheder studies were held in the home of a particular Reb Yeshaya. At that time, the Lubavitch police force, Lubavitch was the name of the town, the police force consisted of a Pristov and a Radnik and 3 Dezatniks. Well, these are all Russian words. I guess an officer, a lieutenant, whatever, different police officers, with another 5 that were added on market days to keep the peace. And this is what happened. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We're talking about in the year 1891. It was a market day, and I was walking from the Cheder, from his school, for lunch, together with his friend Shimon, the son of Rav Shmuel the writer. The market square was jammed. It was filled with carts and horses and peasants. We met Reb David the butcher carrying a calf on his shoulders, a small lamb in his arms, and a basket of chickens hanging in front of him. Noticing me, his face lit up, his white teeth peeking out, and he said, "I hope to God that I'll earn well. Ich hoffe zu Gott, als ich will gut verdienen. I hope that I'll make a living today." Before he finished speaking, one of the policemen suddenly sprang up beside him and struck him a blow across his face. Blood ran down his nose. Seeing this, I yelled, the young boy, the previous Rebbe, I yelled at this policeman, "Drunk, despicable one," and I shoved him hard. So give my shtup azoi. The policeman fell upon me and accused him that he'd ripped off his brass badge on his chest, and he was interfering in the carrying out his duties. And he instructed one of the other policemen to take him to the police station. So this 11-year-old boy, who was to become the great previous Rebbe, eventually was taken to the police station. Before I had a chance to utter a sound, this half-drunk peasant grabbed me with a coarse and powerful hand by my clothing and by the neck. The commotion in the market was at its peak. It was hard to go. It was like 42nd Street on 7th Avenue, like at rush hour. Everybody was pressed together, and there were horses and there were other livestock walking around. And because of all the noise, no one paid attention to me and my escort. And here was this 11-year-old being escorted by this drunkard so-called policeman to the police station. They were brought to the station. They arrived at the station courtyard. The guard opened up the gate, and my escort handed me over to the officer on duty with notification that I was arrested for this terrible crime of so-called, which wasn't true obviously, of ripping off the policeman's badge and interrupting his duty, his work. So the officer on duty received me with a horrible face, glared with me contempt. He awarded me with a slap across the face, grabbed me by the lobe of my ear, and led me to one of the cells. He opened up the doors of the dark room, pushed me in, and locked it. And I, at that point, again, this is from the diary, a terrible fear descended upon me. I also felt very hungry, but after a moment, a thought flashed through my mind. Why? I too, just like my holy grandfathers, am sitting in prison. This was a well-known fact that all the Chabad Rebbes, all the way back from the Alter Rebbe, all the way, they were always put into prison for spreading Judaism back in Soviet Union. So it went through his mind, what am I getting upset about? I'm doing what my whole grandfathers did, to sit in prison. So I must occupy myself with words of Torah. And I was already fluent in 2 volumes of the Mishnayos, and I began to review them by heart. Suddenly, I heard a sound of a drawn-out grunt. My imagination frightened me, and I was trembling with fear. I strained to focus my thoughts on the words, which I was reciting by heart, and moved away from the corner from where this grunt and sound was coming from, and I concentrated on reviewing the Mishnayos. To this day, I remember the thoughts which ran through my mind at the time concerning, because he saw it was getting late,